The difference was back then you could. Yeah. Back then you had the ability and the freedom to shake the tree a little more than they can now. And that was a big advantage to us. But it was fun because...
This is going to hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I mean, I would do 4 to 12s and get into the precinct at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, really?
And get there and see the guy. But everyone did, because everyone at that time loved the job. When I got, I blow people away with this. When we took the test in 1987, 85,000 people took the test.
Wow.
On just that one test. Now multiply that by, the 2 or 3 after that. So at that time, being an NYPD cop was it. So there was other guys who would get there that early, and you'd find out what happened on the day tour. Did anything go on? You took your time, kind of get dressed. You got something to eat, and then you went on the street.
And you sat around and bullshitted.
Yeah,
because cops were friends back in the day.
Right.
Well, you can go to your precinct and sit there. You sit in the locker room and you just tell locker room stories for hours.
Well, that's the difference between firemen and cops. Firemen have dinner together after a call, after they're doing something, and that's how they decompress. And that's why there's less, and I want to stress less trauma in fire departments.
Less suicides also.
There's less suicides.
Right.
Yes, they're still there.
And that's why there's such a the NYPD, LA probably to a point, but having a partner in the NYPD is so different than other departments.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because that bond is forever. I mean, I literally, God's honest truth, still talk to my dad's partner.
Yeah.
all the time. I'm very good friends with Joe Hardiman's his name. Timmy Hardiman is still a very good friend of mine, his son. We grew up together. And Joe is still alive, thank God, and we still talk.
It's funny. Everybody I've ever talked to from NYPD, their partner was either the best man at their wedding or their kid's godfather.
Well, look at it in terms like this. Like, you and I have never really had partners because our departments weren't big enough to have partners. You had people you worked with, and you call them your partner, but they're really not your partner. Well, think about our life now, Mike. Mike and I we're partners. He knows when I'm not able to talk. He knows when to jump in. Like, and that's the same symbiotic relationship.
We know when we're having bad days.
Yeah, yeah. Like if I don't hear from him for a couple of days, I'll just send him a text. Hey, you okay? It's happened numerous times. I know when his shooting was. And he knows what mine is.
If I have another kid, Kevin's going to be the godfather.
I don't want to be a godfather. First of all, you're going to have one of those senior citizen kids. Because you're getting there, bro.
I am.
You're getting there.
55. 57, I mean.
How long did you stay in patrol?
Oh, I was only in uniform for 3 years, and then I went into anti-crime, which was a plainclothes unit in the precinct.
I wonder about that, too, because you have certain officers who stay in uniform for their entire career, and then you have others that matriculate rather quick. Why? And I know this happens in big departments, but I want to know why.
Why I did?
Why? No, why? Like, some just stay in uniform. Is it because they want to, or just have no drive?
They're comfortable.
Yeah.
It's a comfort thing. You know what they're doing every day. This is what and a lot of them just like it. I spent time on patrol with, when I first got to the precinct, there were guys on patrol for 20 years. White shield, driving in their sector, doing their thing, and that was their thing. They loved it. They didn't want to take any tests. They didn't want to go to a detail. Whereas me, the only thing I ever wanted to be was a detective. That was my goal, and getting there was the ultimate. So anything I did for that was the path I took. And I was busy. I made a lot of collars on patrol, got in a shooting on patrol, bribery collars, all that. And the opening happened in anti-crime, which at the time was a fantastic unit. You were plainclothes, driving around in a livery cab.
Yeah.
Small team. You did, off-hour tours. And Jimmy Mack, who I mentioned before, was my sergeant. So life was even better, with him there. But that was a great place to be.
I saw a livery cab in New York one time, and it had blue rims, and I said, that's a cop car right there. That's a cop car.
Were you married at the time?
When I first got on, no.
No.
I got married 2 years after I got on the job.
May I ask
yes,
if you're still
33 years later. 31 years later. Sorry.
Okay, most prison sentences aren't that long. I just want to point that out. But the funny thing is because I have a theory. I have a working theory. If you were married, then became a cop, your rate of divorce is higher because the job changes you.
Yes.
Did I ever tell you I was married before I became a cop?
Thank you. Thank you. Because I've seen it. I've seen divorce happen in people who are married, then became cops because they just become different people versus, be a cop and then get married. Do you think that has any play?
Yeah, I do. Because it's a journey, and being a cop's wife is harder than being a cop.
True.
100%.
True.
It is.
100%.
And, Ange was with me in 89. That's when we met. So I didn't get on until 90.
Did she have any family in law enforcement?
No.
No, so she
Nope.
went in blind.
Yep. And I remember when I got on, she had a big talk with my mom. My mom sat her down and went, here's how it works. Trust. He'll be okay. You have to trust his ability. You have to trust what he's doing, and he'll be okay. Anything goes on, give me a call. I mean, her and my mom were pretty tight. And my mom went through it for 26 years through the 60s and 70s.
At least she had somebody to lean on.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And my sisters and Angela are very tight, so they had her also. She had them also. But I think it was easier for her to us start off not on the job and then watching how excited I was to get to that point. And thank God, for her. And I don't say it just because I'm on a show and it's the right thing to say about your wife.
Otherwise, she'll divorce you.
Yeah,
That's all right.
Kiss ass.
I may get home and it might, but thankfully, because what she's done the last, the 30 years I was on with situations I was in, and then getting into JTTF and going to 18 different countries around the world, and her being home with 3 kids by herself.
It's very important to have an understanding wife. Or just an understanding partner, whether it be wife, husband, partner, or whatever. It's very important that they understand what you're doing,
right.
what you're going through, what you see on a daily basis, when to talk to you, when not to talk to you.
But they become single parents.
Yeah.
They do.
Oh,
they become single parents.
absolutely.
My wife said that to me several times. I was a single parent.
Yeah.
And, afterwards, when I couldn't take care of myself, she was even more of a single parent. So having that rock and that stability at home is so essential to doing your job better.
Right. Oh, I was just going to say that makes your job better and easier because you're not thinking about that because your kids are in a good spot.
I was going to say, everything's secure at home, so you can go and do your job.
Absolutely.
And then when you get back, everything's going to be status quo.
And we had an understanding. I made a promise to her to always give her a call when I could, to not leave her out there hanging if something came across the news, which did happen one night and scared the hell out of her. She knew I was working. She knew I was, doing a 4 to 12 one night, and it came over the news that a young cop got shot, and they had said on the radio and on the news that it happened in Manhattan North because he was at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. And Ange knew where that was because I ended up there a few times. So she knew it was in Manhattan North, but they weren't releasing the name of the cop, and I couldn't get to a phone because we were at the hospital, and what happened was the cop got shot in the 4-4, and they drove him across the bridge into Columbia Press because it was the closest hospital. And, we shot up to the hospital quick, so I wasn't able to get to her.
We didn't have cell phones back then.
Right. And she actually, to this day, she'll even say that was probably the most nervous she was in the 30 years I was working.
Because the wives all talk. I saw that with my thing. I didn't have my cell phone on me, and I was standing post waiting for this guy to come out for 2 hours. All the wives say, hey, there was a shooting in Roseland, and, is your husband working? Yeah, he's working. I can't get in touch with him. I can't reach his cell phone. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally get to a phone. It's not even my phone. She's getting a call from an unknown number. The anxiety that I say that over and over again, that the people at home are really the unsung heroes.
Oh, yeah. And when I got in my shooting, during my shooting, one of our cops got shot. He got shot in the leg. He survived. But nevertheless, he was shot. We got to the hospital because we got taken there, for trauma reasons because we had a shooting with 3 guys. Right after a supermarket robbery. And the first thing I did when I got to the hospital was grab our PBA delegate, find me a phone. And I called her from the emergency room. You're going to hear this on the radio because there was a cop shot. It's Ralph who was at our wedding. So she even knew who Ralph was. He got shot. I'm fine. We're good. And all she needed to hear was my voice, and she was okay.
But see, it's weird. Like you said, you have to go to the hospital when you're involved in a shooting. Everybody says, see, I was a cop in a small town. It was 2 miles square, maybe. And everybody knows everybody's business. I was involved in a shooting at 2:27 in the morning, and I said, you know what? Someone's going to call and say, because they always tell you have to go to the hospital. They're going to call my ex-wife and say, there was a shooting, Mike's in the hospital.
Right.
Because you know how the grapevine is.
Yep.
7 minutes after my shooting, I called my ex-wife. I said, there was a shooting. I'm okay.
Yep. You have to, you know, because, even back then without the social media aspect like it is today, the news was on.
Yeah.
And that's the first story on the news. So I just had to get ahead of that. And thankfully I did. And she was actually at work because it was about 1:13 in the afternoon. So I took care of that. So
I'm sure you had some hairy calls. Early on in your career, what do you think was the most hairy?
Oh, wow. We had, you know what? I'm going to try to remember. All right. There was one night that I've actually spoken about at colleges, and I've had that question. What was the craziest night? What was the craziest call? And I'm going to go through it quick. We always had a routine, me and my partner, to get something to eat at the beginning of the tour because you didn't know what the rest of the day was going to be. So we grabbed like pizza. We're sitting on Riverside Drive. Narcotics starts chasing the guy around the corner, like right to our car. We jump out, grab him, tackle him, take care of it. A couple hours later, 5 people get shot on 149 and Broadway in our command. We get to the scene, do what we have to do. A couple hours later, we get a call of a 7-day-old baby not breathing. We run up the stairs because the elevator's not working, obviously.
Of course.
We run up 7 flights of stairs. The mother meets us in the hallway and just hands us a lifeless baby. Grab the baby, take off, run down the stairs. I'm driving, doing 100 miles an hour up Riverside Drive while we're pumping the baby's chest. My partner's breathing in his mouth. I slide sideways into Columbia Press, and as we do that, the baby starts crying. So
greatest sound in the world.
I was going to say, you hate when babies cry, but that's the greatest sound
greatest
ever.
sound in the world. And then two hours later, the incident with the cop getting shot and killed happens.
Oh my gosh.
That was one night.
Wow.
And you're supposed to go home and just say, okay, honey, I'm home. I'm going to bed.
That was one night. And when the cop got shot, Officer McDonald gets to
Steve McDonald?
Sean McDonald from the 4-4.
Yeah, I remember Stephen McDonald. He was the one that was paralyzed.
Yes, Sean McDonald was his name from the 4-4. Walked into a robbery. They shot him. They threw him in a car, took him to Columbia. And once that happens, you just shoot up to the hospital and start trying to block, roads off so they can get there. And we just happened to be in the bay of the emergency room and got to the car first. And actually, we took him out of the car, put him on the stretcher, and they took him in. So that was the end of that night. But that was one night.
That was exactly the same answer. Did you ever do any jobs with Mike Codella?
No.
I forget what precinct he worked out of, but he did a lot of undercover work. But early on, he was in Coney Island. That's right. He was in Coney Island. Most memorable call is Blue Baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can deal with it when it's somebody who's a little older. You can deal with it.
Did you have kids at that point?
No.
Yeah. Because when you have kids and you see the blue baby, your kid's face was right on that baby.
Oh,
yeah.
It was, that was a tough one, because you try and you're driving, you're talking on the radio, and everyone that night did a phenomenal job shutting Riverside Drive down, shutting the side streets down so we could get up there. And, you just don't crash. That was about it. Just get up there. And we did, and thankfully it worked out.
And that's such a special thing about law enforcement, too, because if you got to get somewhere, you have, like you said, you got a baby not breathing or anything, you put it out, cops are coming from everywhere. Block down roads, block down streets, do this, do that. And people don't see that. People want to badmouth cops.
Oh, yeah.
We go through a lot of shit to try to help people.
To be fair, some of it is our own fault that we get badmouth.
Sometimes we shut down roads just for ha-has.
But you did a lot of, I read your resume. You've done a lot of different details. Any one of them that sticks out as your favorite?
Narcotics.
Why? What was the draw of that?
It was, the draw of it was the team I had. We had a very tight close-knit team. We were friends. My partner on the team, I had met when I was in the 3-0 on patrol, and Carlos was a narcotics detective in Manhattan North. And we just clicked, started talking, became friends, and then I got in narcotics in the Bronx, and he had transferred to the Bronx. So we ended up on the same team. And he, to this day, is still a dear friend of mine. And Carlos taught me how to be in narcotics. He was so good. He was so good, and someone to look at, to go, all right, those are the cases I want to do. That's what I want to do.
You got to be a good actor in narcotics.
Oh yeah, and you got to be hungry. You got to have an imagination. You got to shake the tree.
The drugs aren't going to come to you.
Right.
You got to go to the drugs.
The difference was back then you could. Yeah. Back then you had the ability and the freedom to shake the tree a little more than they can now. And that was a big advantage to us. But it was fun because my team all had the same kind. We hated doing B&B. We hated doing buy and bust. We wanted to do cases. So we just kept doing cases and doing cases. And Carlos had a memorable case. And at the end, we got 121 kilos of coke.
Wow.
From
I mean 120.
100. A DEA case that we did jointly with them, a group of guys from Venezuela that we ran. And it was such a good case. But narcotics was a lot of fun. Those search warrants, I was the RAM guy, so it made it even more fun. And, we had the bet every search warrant. If I hit the door in one shot, I didn't pay for dinner.
Okay.
That was the deal. And
a lot of pressure.
It was, but
but it gave you incentive to open that door in the first shot.
Yep, and Carlos always got mad at me, and my team kind of got mad at me because the way I did it, I didn't hit the door and move to the side. I would hit the door and run through it.
But that's the most. So
drop the ram right there, and people are tripping over the ram.
Right. Well, it was good because we would always try to get the layout of the apartment. So, like I said, we were very tight and very knowledgeable of each other's abilities and what we were doing. So we would lay out the apartment, and I would always tell them, I'm going to hit it, and I'll turn into this room and let everyone go by.
But you get the layout of the apartment probably from like a CI.
Correct.
And they're not the most reputable people anyway.
But the greatest metaphor for life is being the first through the door.
Yeah.
Your first through the door is not the most dangerous. Second through the door is usually the most dangerous because then they wake up and figure out what's going on. Right? So first through the door sounds bad, but it's not as bad as you think.
That's why you went through first.
Right. But think about that as a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
You're the first one through the door. You're not going to catch the flack. Second one and third one, they're going to get it.
Yep.
So,
It's the rattlesnake theory. Rattlesnake doesn't bite. Rattlesnake doesn't bite the first person. Rattlesnake gets pissed off at the first person. They bite the second person.
Right.
So if you're ever walking down where there's a rattlesnake, you say to I don't want to say your wife. You say to your friend, "I'll go first."
No, you tell your wife you're going to go for a walk in the woods and you wear sneakers, and she's going to say, "You can't outrun a bear." And I said, "I don't have to outrun a bear. I just got to outrun you."
That's right.
That's all you got to do.
When it comes to a bear, you got to outrun one person.
That's it. That's it. Especially when you trip them first.
But narcotics was great, and then a very close second was JTTF because it just.
So explain JTTF.
The Joint Terrorism Task Force is a FBI task force comprised of about 60 different police departments or agencies throughout the country. And it's New York.
Post 9/11?
Well, yes, because pre 9/11, there were only, I think, 11 detectives assigned to JTTF prior to 9/11. 9/11 happens, and the New York office just becomes this mammoth animal. We had the largest JTTF in the country. We were it. If New York wanted a case, we had it, regardless of where it was. We would find a connection in New York because New York was the number one target. So if it was a case that we wanted, we sometimes took it. We creatively talked our way into taking it. And that was a lot because of the Eastern District of the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was the strongest in the country. So if they wanted a case, it got to New York. And after 9/11, I got asked by a sergeant I used to work with to come down to the task force. And JTTF at the time was so a high-level detail, you didn't really put in for it because it was kind of unattainable. It wasn't a place you went, yeah, that's where I'm going, because no one went there. So to get asked to go there was a big deal. And Danny, my partner, Danny Murphy, got picked up at the same time. So I actually worked for him again in the task force. And that experience was second to none because of just the work we were doing.
And it was the most important thing in the country at the time.
At that point, right after 9/11, yeah.
Absolutely right. You know,
Now 22 years later, I think it's fallen by the wayside, which is probably a big mistake.
Oh, yeah, because, you know, terrorists, the one thing you learn, they don't have a timetable. They don't.
They're very patient.
Right. They don't care about time.
Yeah.
I went to Anniston, Alabama years ago on a weapons of mass destruction class. It was a federally funded thing. They said,
just come to my bathroom. You see mass destruction.
mass destruction.
Yeah.
They said terrorists are very hard workers. They're very good actors, and they're very patient.
Mm-hmm.
They said they said, what if they get a guy to work in every NFL stadium around the country right now? They're very hard workers and they're good actors. They're going to be working their way up the chain, working their way up. Then one day they're going to say, okay, on such and such date, when there's 32 teams, or 16 NFL stadiums are full, we're going to release ricin or anthrax in the stadium. They said there's nothing we can do about it. We just got to hope that we could stop it.
It's a great job making a battle plan for them. You want to write that one down?
Yeah, no kidding.
Just hand it to them.
They don't listen to this.
But you've seen so much in your career, and the stresses, they weigh on you after a time.
Yeah.
Dude, how did you deal with them? How did you cope with them? We all have our different coping mechanisms.
Yep. On patrol, I dealt with it a certain way. And it was great that I lived about an hour outside New York City.
I was
Because
just gonna
that
say
ride
something.
home
The
was
decompression ride.
the best ride home. You put the radio on. If it was nice out, you put the windows down. You calm down. Because back then, like I said, was nonstop for 8.5 hours. Every night was something.
Well, the shift went through like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Calls Holden and
Oh my God. It was, you know, and then just the in progress ones and the chases and the fights, you know, it was just constant. So that hour driving home was a big deal. And then I always had this thing that I watched TV for an hour, even when I got home. It didn't matter what time it was. And going back to you know, being with Ange, she knew that. So she heard me come home. She knew I was going to put the TV on for about an hour. And that worked. And then other ways, the good thing, I think the advantage I had with not being stressed but not going down a really bad road was I never drank and I never smoked. So that was never an option. Like, I'm going to go home and have a drink, you know, or I'm going to go out with the guys and go to a bar until 4 or 5 in the morning.
or how many of those guys on the ride home had drinks on the ride home?
Oh, God. You grabbed the 6-pack, you put it on the, you know, your passenger seat and you drove home. And it was gone by the time they got home.
Road sodas.
Road soda, yeah.
You don't travel alone.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so that was, I think, a big advantage of mine, not having that thought in my head. So I just dealt with it. But the difference today, and we've talked about this, Kev, the outlets today and the assistance programs that are out there today, thank God, are in place.
No.
You know, other than what it was when I got on.
Well, you had your father. Did your father ever try to, you know, prepare you for what you're going to see?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we would talk. I mean, we talked every day. We talked all the time. And that was a great outlet because he knew what I was talking about. You know, he went through it, through Fort Apache, through, you know, all that crazy time in the 70s. So he lived through it. So nothing surprised him of anything I was saying. And he always talked about, you talk about it. Get it off. Don't keep it inside. So another great outlet with my wife was talking about it. I'd come home. Okay, we did this. Even if it was a quick, this is what happened tonight. We chased the guy across 3, you know, rooftops, which she didn't love hearing, but it was a way to just get it out of me so it wasn't cooped up in me.
Well, it's a different mindset from what I'm used to because I didn't have that father who I could go talk to. So I kept it inside because I wanted to shield my wife. I always felt that she didn't sign up for it. I signed up for this. She didn't sign up for it. So I'm going to try to shield it from her. And, you know, look what happened. It made me fall apart because I didn't have that outlet to do it. And if you can't go see a psychiatrist, you go see a psychiatrist, you're done.